There's a place where the mist clings to the trees like a silent warning, where hikers vanish without a trace, where locals whisper of things best left alone. This is the Great Smoky Mountains, and something or someone is out there living off the grid, watching, waiting, and thriving where no one should be able to. Long before roads and trails crossed these mountains, the Cherokee lived here for thousands of years. They called this land Shakonajee, the place of blue smoke. They respected the land, but they also feared it. Their oral traditions spoke of areas where people simply vanished, of sounds in the night that were not animals and were not man, of things that they saw that walked like men but were not men. Certain ridges and hollers were avoided entirely. Even today, some Cherokee elders warn, don't follow the crying into the woods. During the vicious Civil War, the Appalachian region, and particularly the Smokies, were in utter chaos. Both Confederate and Union deserters fled into the Smokies to escape death or justice. Some say they grouped up in abandoned hollers. They formed rogue settlements, and there they survived on roots, stolen supplies, wild game and fish, whatever they could get. Records from the 1860s have a mention of bands of mountain men, and these bands of mountain men were reported to attack supply routes. But then, after that report, no further word. No mention of arrests, no follow-up on the status of these guys, nothing. They simply disappeared deeper into the Smokies. So, could they have married, raised families? And what would those families look like after living over 150 years in complete isolation, cut off from the rest of the world? There are many, many alleged eyewitness accounts from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park of some very odd things. Here are just a few of them. Multiple visitors have reported seeing figures in the distance that looked human, but were moving way too fast to be human. And they said that they would drop down on all fours and scurry into the undergrowth. An account from 1999 from a hiker near Tremont described that he saw a naked ash gray man. He said the man ran up a steep slope and that he moved like a lizard. I guess he dropped down on all fours and scurried right up the slope at a super high rate of speed. Another account, campers in Elkmont reported to rangers that they had heard chattering. They said it sounded like people mimicking speech outside their tent. They said this went on all night long. They kept checking outside the tent, and no one was there. So that's a little unnerving. Here's an account from a bow hunter in 2007. He claims to have snapped a photo of what he thought was a bear until he zoomed in. He said whatever it was had long limbs, zero fur, and forward-facing eyes. And this poor guy got so freaked out, he never went back to that area to hunt again. I doubt he ever hunted again. That's not something you want to see. One of the most circulated and well-known stories about the Great Smokies came from an alleged former park ranger, and this guy posted this story to Reddit in 2016. He said there were areas where his superiors told he and the other rangers they were not to patrol alone at all. He said they would find odd stacked rock patterns near some of the disappearance locations. I guess little stones stacked up, one on top of another is what he's talking about. He also described a particular case where he and a partner had found a white Jeep abandoned at a remote trailhead. He didn't say which trailhead. I guess the person never turned up, but they did find a Jeep. 3 days later, a trail cam deep in the backcountry, that means off trail, away from where hikers are, recorded something moving. The still image showed a pale figure crawling on all fours. It had very long limbs, human-like, and the creature's eyes reflected light, eye shine, like an animal. Typically, you won't see eye shine with a person. This ranger said, we weren't allowed to talk about it. Cades Cove is one of the most visited areas in the Great Smokies. It's one of the most beautiful places. It's a picturesque area, a big open valley. There's a motor loop that goes all the way around it. Really quite a place. A lot of preserved homesteads in there. Really something. But it's also where disappearances have occurred and where visitors have reported seeing some very strange things. So I have a couple of stories about things in and around Cades Cove. First off, this story goes back to 1991. A couple was camping off a trail, and they said that they heard a baby crying out in the woods all night long. So they checked with the ranger the next day. The ranger told them there was no one within 5 miles of their campsite, according to the sign-in sheet that he had. Then, later on in 2003, a hunter is said to have found an old shack torn apart from the inside. He said there was wood splintered everywhere. No claw marks like a bear, no blood like something had been torn apart in there. Just a shredded sleeping bag, and beside the sleeping bag was a half-eaten deer leg. So that's something. Then there's the woman at the ridge. This is a scream that is heard in and around Cades Cove. Sounds like a woman screaming. The locals gave her the name Woman of the Ridge. I don't know what that thing is screaming. It doesn't sound like a woman to me. It sounds more like a banshee. Very creepy. Another place in the Great Smokies Park with a lot of strange goings on is a place called Deep Gap. Now, Deep Gap is a quiet place, really much too quiet of a place, some would say. So here's a few stories about Deep Gap. Seems there was a solo hiker who had signed in with the Rangers, went in there sometime in 2008, I'm not sure what month, and this guy vanished, gone. Rangers, when he was supposed to sign out, they called the search and rescue folks because they had seen neither hide nor hair of this guy. Search and rescue teams went out, they found nothing. Not a trace, not a piece of clothing, no blood, not a thing. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, some campers who were camping a few ridges over from that location where this guy disappeared, they reported that they heard long, human-like screams at around 2 a.m. So they must have slept really good that night. They were brave enough the next morning to get up and search around where they thought the screams were coming from. What they found was a set of footprints, no shoes, sunk deep into the mud, headed up a hill, and they said up at the top of that hill there was nothing in particular there, and then the tracks just trailed off. So that's interesting. Another witness claimed he saw a woman who was crawling fast on all fours like a spider, and he said she darted between two trees, turned around and stared at him for a while, and he said that her eyes didn't blink. So it seems that missing persons reports in the Great Smokies National Park follow some very interesting patterns. These are very similar to the patterns we first heard about from Dave Paulides, author of Missing 411. If you haven't read those books, I suggest you do. However, they are really pretty scary. So here's what the search and rescue folks that have searched in the Smokies have to say. They say that often the missing person is reported to have gone off the trail very briefly, and then the rest of the group notices that they have just vanished. Also, the trained dogs, often bloodhounds, lose the trail almost instantly. Very unusual. Another thing, the search and rescue teams will grid an area, then suddenly move 5 miles away based on new information. This happened in the Dennis Martin case, if you're familiar with that. So again, this is what Dave Paulides in his Missing 411 research pointed out, that these search and rescue teams jump for some reason to a distant location. And several of the cases are marked closed, even though there's no resolution to the case. And the families are often told to just stop asking questions. Just stop. So with no resolution, they're encouraged to stop. I don't think that sounds very nice. So, what's really going on in the Great Smoky Mountains? What's happening with all these strange sights and sounds, disappearances, all this bizarre things that's going on? So there's a number of theories that various folks have. We'll go over some of those, although this is certainly not a complete list. It could be any number of other things, which we could get into at a later time, but here's just a few. So some believe that what's going on is that feral people who are the descendants of Civil War deserters or people who escaped the Great Depression, maybe World War II, World War I deserters out living in the woods, their descendants, that's what we're seeing as the feral people. Also, it could be a sort of a squatter type situation where these folks maybe in small groups, have simply checked out of modern living in a city or somewhere else, and they're out there just living free, maybe stealing things from campers as needed or as available. Who knows? Who knows what could be going on as far as the feral people? There is a lot of evidence for feral people, and that is, I think, a pretty interesting and pretty likely scenario. So, other folks who are sort of in the cryptid camp believe that all these sightings are basically can be chalked up to one or another species of cryptid, like a Sasquatch or a dogman, or maybe even some sort of relic hominid that has survived for untold millennia undetected, and it just happens to make its living in various places like national parks. Then within folklorish type circles, there's a lot of talk about other types of creatures. For one, which I think is a pretty terrifying creature, the rake. The rake is a very gaunt, pale, humanoid looking critter that sort of crawls on all fours, and it's glowing eyes, and some people claim they've captured on trail cams images of these things, and they're also rumored to be extremely hostile. So that doesn't sound like anybody you want to meet. A few folks go even further, and they talk about things like interdimensional entities that can come through portals and take people at will and then simply go back through the portal. There's also talk of old world spirits that are trapped between realms. I guess this would be in the arena of elementals from Ireland and Scotland, if you're familiar with those. But maybe the simplest and the scariest explanation is they're just people, feral people. And these feral people who chose to leave civilization behind generations ago, now they simply see anyone else that they can single out and get alone as prey. Another good question to ask is this: if these things are occurring, and if there are unknown creatures of various types in the Smokies and other national parks, why the silence? Well, here's one reason, one possibility. Tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park has over 14 million visitors a year. It is the most visited national park. So, missing people, strange creatures, man, that's bad for business. The park rangers are discouraged from discussing unconfirmed sightings, and I can tell you that is 100% true. I know that personally. And there's the trail cam footage that often goes missing from the trail cams that the park rangers put out. The case files, they're closed without an official explanation. And then there's the silence, which may not be accidental. So the next time you go for a hike in the Smoky Mountains, here's what to do. Number one, stay on the trail. Number two, don't chase voices, especially if you hear those voices calling your name and they sound like someone you may know. Don't investigate stacked stones in areas where you know there's not been anyone around for a while. And if you feel or see something watching you from the woods, keep walking. The feral people are still out there, watching, waiting, and the Smokies aren't the only place you can find feral people. The Ozarks have their secrets. 2,